Ever wonder why Norwegian athletes keep showing up on the podium in endurance sports? Cross-country skiing, running, triathlons, they're crushing it. But here's the thing, they're not just training harder than everyone else, they're training differently, and it's backed up by science. Take Jakob Ingebrigtsen, for example. This guy won Olympic gold in the 1500 meter at just 20 years old. Or Norway's cross-country ski team, world champions season after season. Or Christian Blumenfeld's dominance in triathlon. What sets all these athletes apart? It's actually called the Norwegian method, and it's not your typical training program. So what exactly is this method? The Norwegian approach is based on three core principles: high volume, moderate intensity, and scientific precision. Let's dive into each one, starting with high volume. These athletes are logging hours in what's called zone 2. This is a heart rate training zone that's typically defined as 60 to 70% of max heart rate. With these elite athletes though, they can typically be pushed higher than that, around 65 to 75%, since they are so well conditioned. This is where they put in the majority of their high volume training, often 20 plus hours per week. But these athletes aren't just doing zone 2 training. In fact, they tend to do a lot of work at moderate intensity. This is called threshold or tempo training. And to do this right, you have to be really precise. To keep their training laser focused, Norwegian athletes use regular lactate testing, sometimes every few weeks or even daily before big races. By staying between 2 and 4 millimolar of blood lactate concentration, they optimize their intensity, ensuring that they're always just beneath that threshold where lactate begins to build up too quickly. This is where the Norwegian method really stands out. Most training styles focus on a polarized approach. For example, 90% low intensity, 10% high intensity. There's actually a lot of research showing that this polarized approach tends to be superior to a threshold approach. So how are Norwegians doing the threshold approach but getting better results? Well, they realized that not all threshold training is created equal. Above the lactate threshold, even small increases in intensity result in disproportionately higher levels of fatigue. This happens because metabolic byproducts rapidly accumulate, overwhelming the body's buffering capacity. Fatigue-related signaling molecules like AMP-activated protein kinase, AMPK, get activated and signal to the body to downregulate further energy expenditure, which actually slows the athlete down and causes premature exhaustion. This fatigue is compounded by neurological strain, as higher threshold muscle fibers are continuously recruited, leading to faster central and peripheral fatigue. Okay, that's all a really fancy way of saying that it's a much different stimulus to be precisely just below threshold versus drifting above threshold. Norway's athletes are spending a ton of time in that steady controlled zone around 75% of VO2 max where they're just below threshold. They're logging long hours at this moderate intensity, and this strategy allows them to increase time at high aerobic capacity without the fatigue and injury risk of constant max effort sessions or being too far above threshold. Now let's break down the science of why this method is so effective. First, training at that moderate intensity for long durations builds a massive aerobic base. Their VO2 max is off the charts, and some Norwegian cross-country skiers have hit values of 90 on their VO2 max, among the highest ever recorded. This type of training also boosts mitochondrial density, allowing their muscles to produce energy more efficiently. And by training just under their lactate threshold, they increase their lactate clearance rate, enabling them to maintain higher intensities for longer without fatigue. Additionally, this consistent moderate intensity training reduces injury risk compared to high intensity programs. So when done precisely, it's a low risk, high reward model, allowing athletes to train year round with fewer interruptions. So not only are Norwegians taking advantage of the zone 2 low intensity training that a lot of athletes are, they're being really scientifically precise to push some of their training up to that higher intensity, but still below threshold. And doing that in a really precise way is allowing them to get better results. And honestly, Norway's results speak for themselves. Jakob Ingebrigtsen training this way with weekly lactate threshold has become the fastest 1500 meter runner in history. Norway's national ski team, with their relentless focus on high volume, moderate intensity with the Norwegian model, has dominated the world championships and the Olympics. And Christian Blumenfeld has crushed it in the triathlon space. Now, here's the question though. Could this approach work for you or for me? And the answer is Sort of. Adopting the Norwegian model requires some specific equipment like lactate testing tools. But even if you don't have access to that, the principles can be adapted. For example, most endurance athletes would benefit from spending more time being consistently below threshold, around 70% of maximum heart rate. If you haven't tested your maximum heart rate and tracked your heart rate consistently for several months of training, then this is the first thing that you can implement to see further progress with your own endurance training. This will give you that aerobic base building effect and focus on consistency rather than maxing out each session. While targeting a maximum intensity for these long sessions at around 70 to 75% maximum heart rate is an okay general recommendation, lactate threshold does vary quite substantially between athletes, all the way from around 65% maximum heart rate to around 90% maximum heart rate, depending on fitness, genetics, and other factors. Some endurance athletes do like to get a lactate measuring device, which can be done fairly simply, and there are a lot of videos teaching you how to use it. So maybe this has opened your eyes and you do want to go down that route to be a little bit more precise with your training. Another area where I think this information can benefit recreational endurance athletes is understanding the seasonality of training. For example, leading up to the Olympics, this is what Ingebrigtsen's training program looked like. You can see there were months of base building, about 3 to 5 months prior to the Olympics. Then there was more race-specific efforts with less volume leading up to competition. Recreational endurance athletes can take advantage of similar phases or seasons of training. If you're building out your race schedule, plan times of the year when you'll be doing higher volume base building work. Then plan periods a few weeks to months prior to specific competitions where you'll prioritize race-specific efforts. This will ensure that you're balancing long-term adaptations with some of these specific short-term benefits that can help you hit your own PRs. So to summarize, the Norwegians have shown us a specific method of training that involves being precise in training below threshold, allowing for really high aerobic adaptations without fatigue, which is one factor that's helping them train more consistently and with higher volume, leading to success. Wherever you're at with training, being a little bit more precise with your heart rate measurements, or even deciding to implement lactate testing into your training can be helpful to make your training a little bit more precise and help you also get better results. If you enjoyed this breakdown and you learned something, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and let me know in the comments, would you try the Norwegian training method? Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.